"We're alone. Let's do what's necessary," said the Apache woman who was given to a rancher as a joke. The sun was high and harsh over the Arizona desert, casting long, sharp shadows across the cracked earth. The wind carried the dry scent of sagebrush and the faint, dusty smell of distant cattle. In the distance, the small ranch house sat alone, its wooden boards bleached almost white by years under the relentless sun. Smoke curled lazily from the chimney, a signal that someone lived there, though the air around it seemed still and quiet. The land was empty, except for the occasional grazing cow and the wide, endless sky that made the desert feel even more immense. Across this open land, a small figure moved slowly, stumbling over rocks and dry brush. She was a woman, her skin bronzed by the sun, and her hair tangled and streaked with dust. Her face was lined with exhaustion, her eyes tired yet sharp, with a determination that could not be ignored. In her arms, she held a tiny bundle of blankets and cloth, and beside her, 2 children walked carefully, their small feet kicking up puffs of dust with each step. Their clothes were worn and torn, patched repeatedly in places, and their faces carried the same mixture of fatigue and fear as their mothers. The woman paused for a moment, looking out at the distant ranch house. Her heart beat faster, and she tightened her grip on her youngest child. "Where shall we go?" she whispered under her breath. The words were not for anyone to hear but herself, a plea into the empty air of the desert. She had been traveling for days with her children, moving quietly and carefully, trying to avoid soldiers, settlers, and anyone who might see them and bring trouble. They had no home now. Their village had been destroyed, their people scattered. Every step forward was a gamble, a decision that could mean safety or disaster. Finally, she straightened her back and began walking again. The ranch house grew larger in the distance, its details sharper now. She could see the wooden fence that enclosed a small corral and a few cattle grazing lazily. The smell of wood smoke mixed with the dry earth reached her, and she realized that she had to try even though she did not know what to expect. She approached the gate slowly. Her voice was shaking slightly as she called out. "Please," she said, her voice carrying across the open land, soft yet firm. "Please, we have nowhere to go. We need shelter." The rancher appeared on the porch almost immediately, a man with a broad, sun-weathered face, wearing a wide-brimmed hat that shadowed his eyes. His hands rested on the railing as he studied the woman and the children carefully. He did not speak at once. He only watched, taking in every detail. The children's worn clothing, the woman's tired stance, the desperation in her eyes. He had seen travelers before, but there was something different about this group. He could sense the fear that hung around them like a thin, invisible cloak. The woman stepped closer to the gate. "We have no shelter," she repeated, her voice breaking slightly. "We are hungry and tired. Please, can you, help us?" The rancher remained silent for a moment longer, his mind working quickly. He had lived in this land for many years. He knew it was dangerous to take in strangers, especially ones who might be running from soldiers or trouble. There were people in town who would not approve, who might even come to harm him if they discovered someone like her hiding on his property. And yet he could see the sincerity in her eyes. There was no trickery, no hidden threat, only a desperate mother protecting her children. Finally he spoke, his voice low but calm. "Come closer," he said, stepping down from the porch. "But you must stay where I can see you." The woman hesitated, weighing the words carefully. Then, slowly, she stepped forward, keeping her children close. The little boy clung to her skirt, while the older child walked beside her, his small hand holding a piece of cloth that served as a makeshift toy. They moved cautiously, aware of the rancher's watchful gaze. As they reached the gate, the rancher looked at them more closely. He noticed the sunburn on their skin, the dust that coated their hair and clothes, and the thinness of the children's arms and legs. He could see the marks of hunger and fatigue, and something inside him shifted. He had lived a long life on this land, and he had seen much suffering, but seeing it up close, seeing it in the eyes of a mother and her children, brought a weight he could not ignore. "Why are you here?" he asked, keeping his tone neutral but gentle. "Where did you come from?"
"Our village, it was destroyed."
"We had to leave. There is nowhere for us to go." "Please, we are only trying to survive." The rancher nodded slowly, understanding her words without needing more explanation. He knew the history of the land, the conflicts, the violence that had scattered families and communities. He had seen it himself, though he had tried to leave that life behind. Yet here it was, in front of him, demanding attention. He stepped aside slightly, opening the gate. "You may stay for now," he said, "but you must understand, you stay at your own risk. I cannot promise anything beyond this land." The woman's eyes filled with tears, but she held them back. She knelt briefly, thanking him with a quiet bow of her head. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for helping us." The rancher motioned for the children to follow, and they walked slowly into the small yard. He led them toward an old barn at the edge of the property. It was not a luxurious place, but it offered shelter from the sun and wind. Inside, he found a corner where they could rest, and he placed a few old blankets on the ground. The woman helped her children lie down, brushing dust from their hair and smoothing their clothes as best she could. As they settled, the rancher watched from the doorway, his mind a storm of thoughts. He was a man who had chosen a quiet life, away from the conflicts of the past, but now he realized that the past was never far away. It followed him in unexpected ways, demanding that he make choices he had hoped to avoid. The woman looked up at him, her eyes filled with cautious hope. "We will not cause trouble," she said softly. "We only need a place to rest, to eat, and to be safe for a while." The rancher nodded. "You may have that," he replied. "But you must understand, I cannot hide you from everyone. You must be careful, and so must I."
The woman understood.
There was no shame in accepting help, but there was also the knowledge that danger still existed. She looked at her children, who were beginning to close their eyes despite the heat and dust, and she felt a deep, protective determination. She would keep them safe no matter what. As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, casting long, golden shadows across the desert, the rancher returned to his porch. He sat in his chair, watching the sky change colors, thinking about the choices he had made and the ones he would have to make. He did not speak, and neither did the woman. But in the quiet, a fragile understanding began to grow between them, a bond of necessity, of humanity, and of shared recognition of the hardships life could bring. Night fell slowly over the desert, cooling the air and bringing with it the quiet sounds of the land. Crickets chirped, the wind whispered through the brush, and the children slept, exhausted but safe for the first time in days. The woman sat beside them, keeping watch, her hands resting gently on their shoulders. She did not know what tomorrow would bring, but for now, there was a small measure of safety, and that was enough. The rancher, too, watched from his porch, thinking about the unexpected turn of the day. He had helped strangers, taken a risk, and yet he felt no regret. Perhaps this was what it meant to be truly human, to see suffering and respond with kindness, even when it was difficult. And so, under the vast, star-filled sky of the Arizona desert, two worlds met, one of survival, one of cautious protection, And in that meeting, there was a quiet hope that perhaps, even in a harsh and unforgiving land, acts of courage and compassion could make a difference. The next morning, the desert seemed quieter than usual, the air still and heavy, as if the land itself was holding its breath. The sun rose slowly over the horizon, painting the sky in pale shades of pink and gold. Inside the barn, the Apache mother stirred quietly. She did not wake her children, letting them sleep a little longer. Her thoughts were heavy, filled with worry about the future. She did not know what dangers lay ahead, or if the kindness of the rancher would last, but for now, she clung to the small comfort of shelter. Outside, the rancher walked across the yard, his boots crunching over the dry dirt. He stopped near the barn, his eyes scanning the horizon, though there was nothing unusual at first glance. He knew the land well. Every ridge, every wash, every patch of shade was familiar to him. But familiarity did not remove the tension that had settled in his chest. He had lived here for years, raising cattle, tending the fields, and avoiding trouble. Yet now, with the mother and her children on his property, he felt a stirring of old memories he had tried hard to forget. He remembered the days when he had worked as a scout for the U.S. Army, guiding soldiers through these same deserts. He had seen villages burned, families displaced, and people forced to flee their homes. At the time, he had told himself it was duty, that he was only doing what was required. But now, years later, that duty had left a shadow over his life, a shadow that grew heavier with every story of suffering he heard. The rancher sighed, running a hand over his sun-weathered face. He had hidden from that part of himself, tried to live quietly, and never speak of the past. Yet here it was, confronting him again. He had helped people before, of course, but never like this, never with a family so close, so in need. His heart told him to do more, but his mind warned of the consequences. If anyone found out that he was sheltering these strangers, they might think he was disloyal, dangerous, or foolish. Inside the barn, the mother began to stir the children awake. She had no idea what the rancher had done in his past, and she did not care, at least not yet. All she knew was the need to survive, to keep her children safe. She whispered gently to them, brushing hair from their faces and helping them stand. The children rubbed their eyes sleepily, yawning, but they followed her quietly. There was a sense of trust forming, fragile but real, and it gave her a small measure of hope. By mid-morning, the rancher had prepared a simple breakfast. He placed some bread and dried meat on a worn wooden table in the barn, along with water in a small tin cup. The mother approached cautiously, unsure whether to accept the food directly or wait. The rancher offered a reassuring smile, one that did not speak of warmth but of safety, and she nodded quietly before motioning for her children to sit. They ate slowly, savoring the small meal. The children's laughter, though soft, broke the tense silence in the barn. The mother's eyes softened as she watched them, feeling a mixture of relief and fear. Relief because they were safe for the moment, and fear because she knew that danger was never far away. She could not let herself relax completely. After breakfast, the mother stepped outside, carrying a small bundle of belongings. She wanted to clean a little to make the barn more livable. The rancher followed her, keeping a careful distance. He did not speak at first, but she sensed his presence, a steadying force in the unfamiliar land. Finally he spoke, his voice low and measured.
"You are safe here for now," he said.
"But you must understand that this land is not entirely free of danger. Soldiers patrol these areas. Some townspeople are not kind to strangers. You must be careful." The woman nodded, understanding. She had learned to read danger in small signs, the way people looked at her, the tone of voices, the hard edges of towns she passed through. "We will be careful," she promised. "I only ask that you let us rest for a short while, until we can find a safer place." The rancher's gaze softened slightly, though he did not reveal the full weight of his thoughts. He had lived a life full of harsh decisions and quiet regrets. Helping this family was the right thing, he told himself, but it stirred a complicated mix of guilt and hope. He wondered whether his actions today could redeem some of the mistakes he had made long ago. As the day went on, the mother worked to make the barn comfortable. She swept the dirt floor, moved old crates to create small partitions for privacy, and used blankets to make beds for the children. The rancher watched from the doorway, occasionally offering help or advice. He said little, but his presence was reassuring. There was no judgment in his eyes, only a cautious understanding. The children began to play outside, their laughter carrying across the yard. The rancher could not help but watch them with a mix of amusement and nostalgia. He thought of his own family, long gone, and the innocence of childhood. Seeing these children, so young and full of life despite the hardships they had endured, reminded him of why he had chosen to help. Perhaps he could not change the past, but he could influence the present, even in small ways. Yet the peace of the morning was fragile. The rancher knew that the world beyond his property was not forgiving. There were men in nearby towns who would not hesitate to question his loyalty or accuse him of harboring fugitives. Soldiers might pass through, looking for anyone they considered a threat. Every decision he made now could carry consequences he could not fully control. He returned to the porch, watching the mother tend to her children. He remembered the faces of those he had encountered years ago, faces full of fear, sorrow, and desperation. The memory made his chest tighten. He had once been part of the machinery that caused suffering, guiding soldiers through lands that were home to families like this one. The thought made him uneasy, but he pushed it aside, focusing instead on what he could do today. The mother approached him, carrying a small pail of water. "Thank you for letting us stay," she said softly. "I do not know how we would have survived without your help."
"You are welcome," he replied. "But you must understand I cannot protect you forever."
"You will need to find a place where you can live safely. I can only give you time, not a permanent home." She nodded, her eyes filled with gratitude. "I understand," she said. "But for now, this is enough. For now, we are safe, and that is what matters." The day wore on, and the sun climbed higher in the sky, turning the desert into a shimmering heat. The mother and her children rested in the shade of the barn, while the rancher worked in the yard, repairing a fence and checking on the cattle. Every so often he would glance toward the barn, ensuring that the family was still safe. He had not expected to feel this protective, this connected to strangers, but the sight of their small, vulnerable forms tugged at something deep inside him. As evening approached, the air cooled slightly, and the desert sky transformed into a brilliant canvas of orange and red. The mother gathered her children inside the barn once more, preparing a small meal for them. She moved quietly, careful not to disturb the fragile sense of security that had settled over the yard. The rancher remained on the porch, watching the horizon, his thoughts turning again to the past. He remembered the orders he had once followed, the villages he had seen abandoned, and the faces of people who had looked to him for guidance. Those memories had haunted him for years, but now, helping this family, he felt a glimmer of hope. Perhaps he could act differently this time, making choices that brought safety instead of fear. Perhaps he could find a small measure of redemption in the quiet, simple act of offering shelter. Night fell over the desert, and the stars began to appear, twinkling in the clear sky. The children slept soundly, exhausted from the day's journey and activities. The mother sat quietly beside them, keeping watch, her eyes scanning the dark landscape for any signs of danger. The rancher lit a small lantern on his porch and watched the family, thinking about the choices he had made and the ones he would have to make in the days to come. In the stillness of the desert night, a fragile bond had begun to form between the rancher and the family he had taken in. It was a bond built on trust, compassion, and a shared understanding of hardship. The rancher knew that the days ahead would not be easy. He could not erase the past, nor could he promise safety forever. But for now, he had given them shelter, and that act, small as it seemed, had meaning. And so, under the vast, star-filled sky, two lives intersected in the quiet Arizona desert. One was filled with fear and desperation, seeking only safety and care. The other carried a past heavy with regret, seeking a chance to do what was right. In that meeting there was a fragile hope, a hope that even in a world shaped by conflict and suffering, kindness and courage could still exist, quietly, like a small flame against the darkness. The next morning the sun rose slowly over the Arizona desert, spreading golden light across the dry land. The air was warm but not yet harsh, and a soft breeze rustled the leaves of the few trees near the ranch. The mother awoke first in the barn, stretching her tired arms as she looked around at the small space she now called shelter. The children still slept peacefully, their faces relaxed for the first time in many days. She brushed the dust from the blankets and quietly began to tidy the corner where they had slept. She did not want to disturb the fragile sense of calm that had settled over the barn. For so long, every step she had taken had been careful, every moment filled with fear of discovery. Now, for the first time in days, there was a small measure of safety. She breathed in the dried desert air through the open barn door and allowed herself a brief moment of relief. Outside, the rancher was already at work. He moved slowly and deliberately, inspecting the fences, checking the water troughs, and feeding the cattle. His movements were careful but practiced, the result of years spent managing the land. Every so often his eyes flicked toward the barn, watching the small family he had taken in. He did not speak to them yet, but his presence was steady, a silent assurance of protection. The mother stepped outside with a small pail of water. The rancher nodded at her, acknowledging her without words. There was an unspoken understanding between them. She would care for her children and keep them out of harm's way, and he would provide shelter and protection, as much as he could. "You have to be careful," the rancher said finally, his voice low but firm. "Even here, you are not completely safe. Some people in the nearby town do not welcome strangers. Soldiers sometimes patrol these lands."
You must be aware of your surroundings.
The mother nodded, understanding the warning. "I know," she replied softly. "We have learned to be careful. Every day is a challenge, but for now, we are safe because of your kindness. I will teach my children to be careful as well." The rancher looked at her, noting the determination in her eyes. Despite the exhaustion and the hardships she had endured, she carried herself with a strength that was remarkable. He felt a pang of respect and admiration, though he tried not to show it. He had seen many people pass through the desert, some weak, some desperate, but few who carried themselves with such quiet courage. As the day progressed, the mother began to organize the barn more thoroughly. She used old crates to create small partitions, giving the children some privacy. She swept the floor, gathered loose hay for bedding, and even found a small corner where she could prepare simple meals. The rancher occasionally offered advice or assistance, but mostly he observed, allowing her to make the space her own. The children played near the fence, their laughter ringing softly across the yard. The rancher watched them with a mixture of amusement and nostalgia. He thought of his own family, long gone, and felt a deep, unspoken connection to these children, despite having just met them. Their innocence, their resilience, reminded him of the simpler joys of life, even in a harsh and unforgiving land. Yet beneath the calm, both the mother and the rancher were aware of subtle tension. The rancher had seen the look of caution in her eyes, the way she scanned the horizon for potential threats. He understood perfectly. Life in the desert was never free from danger, and the scars of the past ran deep. The mother, for her part, could sense that he held back details of his own story, that there were parts of his life he did not share. She respected his silence, knowing that trust had to be earned, slowly. By midday, the air had grown warmer, and the mother prepared a small meal for the children. She used a cast-iron skillet over a modest fire, cooking a simple stew of dried meat, beans, and a few vegetables she had managed to gather. The rancher observed quietly, appreciating her skill and care. Even in the simplest acts, he could see the depth of her love for her children. After the meal, the mother gathered her children to rest in the shade of the barn. The rancher continued his work outside, repairing a section of the fence that had been damaged by wind and time. Every now and then he would glance toward the barn, ensuring that the family remained safe. He had not expected to feel such a strong sense of responsibility for strangers, yet he could not deny the connection forming between them. As the afternoon wore on, the rancher approached the barn. "I need to speak with you," he said gently, motioning for her to step outside. She followed him cautiously, holding the hands of her children as they peeked curiously from behind the door. He looked around to ensure they were not being observed, then spoke in a low, serious tone. "You must understand something," he said. "I can protect you here, but only for so long. Others may come looking, men who do not understand why you are here. I do not know if I can keep them away forever." The mother's expression grew serious. "I understand," she replied. "We are grateful for what you have done. I will make sure my children do not bring attention to themselves. We will stay quiet, and we will be careful." He could see that she was resourceful and determined, capable of keeping her children safe even under difficult circumstances. Yet he could not ignore the unease growing in his chest. He had lived a long time in this land, and he knew that trouble could come at any moment, often without warning. As they spoke, the wind shifted, carrying a faint sound across the yard. The rancher paused, listening carefully. There was nothing obvious, but he sensed the faintest trace of movement in the distance. It could have been the wind, or perhaps a distant rider. He did not alarm the family, but his mind worked quickly, considering what to do if danger approached. The mother watched him carefully, noticing the slight tension in his posture. She could sense his concern, though he did not speak of it. In that moment, she realized that he was more than just a rancher. He had knowledge of the land, of the dangers that could appear, and of how to respond. She felt a deep sense of gratitude and cautious trust. Evening approached, and the desert sky turned shades of pink and purple. The children were asleep, and the mother prepared a small dinner. The rancher remained on the porch, keeping watch over the property. The quiet moments allowed them to reflect, each aware of the fragility of the peace they had found. As night fell, the wind picked up slightly, rustling the dry brush and carrying the distant sounds of the desert. The mother sat beside her children, keeping watch, while the rancher lit a lantern on his porch. He could see the outline of the barn, the faint glow of the fire inside, and he felt a sense of responsibility settle over him. These people depended on him, and he could not ignore that duty. Despite the peaceful evening, both the mother and the rancher knew that challenges lay ahead. The desert was a harsh place, and the world beyond the ranch could be unforgiving. Soldiers might pass through, settlers could question their presence, and the family's safety was not guaranteed. Yet, in this small corner of the world, there was a fragile sense of hope. The mother's thoughts turned to the days ahead. She knew she would need to find a more permanent solution for her family. This ranch offered shelter, but it was not a lasting home. She would need to teach her children patience, caution, and resilience. She would need to prepare them for the challenges that lay beyond the barn's walls. The rancher, too, reflected on the days ahead. He had taken a risk by offering shelter, and he knew that more risks might come. Yet he felt a growing sense of purpose in protecting this family. It was a small act of courage, a quiet resistance against the hardships of the world. He could not change the past, but he could influence the present, offering safety and guidance where he could. As the stars appeared in the clear desert sky, the rancher and the mother shared a silent understanding. They were both aware of the dangers, yet they chose to act with compassion and courage. Their trust was fragile, but it existed, and it was enough to sustain them for the moment. Night settled over the ranch, and the desert became a quiet, watchful place. The mother kept her children close, whispering gentle words of comfort, while the rancher remained vigilant, scanning the horizon for any sign of trouble. In that stillness, there was a sense of unity, a quiet bond forged by necessity, trust, and shared recognition of the challenges they faced. And so, under the vast star-filled sky, life at the small Arizona ranch continued. The family found shelter, safety, and a brief respite from the hardships of the world, while the rancher grappled with the responsibilities he had taken on. In this fragile balance, there was hope. A hope that even in a harsh and unpredictable land, trust, courage, and humanity could prevail, at least for a little while. The morning sun rose slowly, casting long shadows across the desert landscape. The ranch was quiet, the cattle grazing lazily under the warmth of the sun. The mother and her children had awakened early, their movements careful and deliberate. They had learned to live cautiously, aware of the dangers that could appear at any moment. The barn offered a small measure of safety, but they knew it could not protect them forever. The rancher stepped outside, scanning the horizon. He had sensed the tension growing over the past few days. The desert was never entirely quiet, and he had learned to notice the smallest signs of trouble. A distant cloud of dust, the sound of hooves, or a change in the wind carrying faint voices. He knew that someone might come looking for the family he had taken in, whether soldiers or settlers who distrusted strangers. As the morning passed, a faint sound reached his ears, almost imperceptible over the breeze. He paused, straining to listen. There it was again, a soft crunching of dirt underfoot, the distant sound of hooves moving quickly. He felt a tight knot form in his chest. Something was approaching. He motioned for the mother to stay in the barn. "You must stay inside with the children," he said quietly. "Do not make a sound. Whatever comes, remain calm." The mother nodded, understanding immediately. She gathered her children close, holding them silently as they crouched in the shadows. The older child clutched a small blanket, while the younger one rested against her mother's side. Their eyes were wide, reflecting fear, but also trust in the rancher. The sound grew louder, and soon the rancher could see dust rising in the distance. 3 men on horseback appeared, their hats low and their expressions stern. They rode with purpose, scanning the land as they approached the ranch. The rancher recognized the danger immediately. These were not travelers seeking rest. They were men who might question him, who might suspect he was hiding someone. He took a deep breath, steadying himself. There was no time for hesitation. He needed to act quickly to protect the family, and he knew that careful planning could prevent violence. He decided to meet the men at the gate, keeping a calm but authoritative presence. As the men approached, he raised his hand in greeting. "Good morning," he said, his voice steady. "What brings you out here?" "Woo." One of the men, the apparent leader, narrowed his eyes. "We heard that someone was hiding in these parts," he said. "Is there anyone here who should not be?" The rancher met his gaze evenly. "No one is here except my family and myself," he replied. "You are welcome to look around, but you will find nothing to concern you." The man on the horse glanced toward the barn, suspicious, but the rancher continued, his voice calm and firm.
"You are free to pass. This is private property, and I ask that you respect it."
There is no need for trouble. For a moment, tension filled the air. The wind seemed to pause, the desert holding its breath. The men on horseback studied the rancher, their eyes sharp, searching for any sign of dishonesty. The rancher stood his ground, radiating quiet confidence. He did not flinch, and he did not allow fear to show. Finally, the leader nodded slightly. "We will leave," he said, though his tone remained wary. "But we will be watching. Anyone seen coming or going from this ranch will be reported." The rancher watched as the men rode away, their dust cloud disappearing into the horizon. He let out a long breath, feeling the tension in his shoulders ease slightly. He had managed the encounter without violence, but he knew it was only a temporary reprieve. The desert was full of people who might question his actions, and he could not assume safety for long. Inside the barn, the mother exhaled slowly. She held her children tightly, feeling the weight of fear mixed with relief. "Thank you," she whispered to the rancher, her voice trembling slightly. "You saved us." The rancher nodded, though he did not offer words of comfort. He was thinking ahead, planning for the days to come. He knew that these men might return, and he needed a strategy to protect the family if they did. The desert offered few options, but he had learned to use the land to his advantage. Every ridge, every thicket, every dry creek bed could serve as a hiding place or a path to safety. He moved barrels and crates near the barn, creating barriers that could shield the family if necessary. He checked the fences, ensuring that the cattle were secure and would not draw unwanted attention. He taught the mother and the children to stay quiet, to watch for any signs of approaching danger, and to remain calm under pressure. As the afternoon sun climbed higher, the family began to feel a sense of cautious normalcy. The children played quietly near the barn, their laughter subdued but present. The mother worked on simple chores, gathering firewood and tidying the space, while the rancher continued his preparations. There was a rhythm to the day, a fragile balance between vigilance and the need for sustenance and rest. Yet even in these quiet moments, the threat lingered. The rancher knew that the men who had passed through were only one of many potential dangers. Soldiers, settlers, and wandering travelers could arrive at any time. He could not predict their intentions, and he could not rely on luck alone. He needed to be ready for any eventuality. As evening approached, the desert sky turned brilliant shades of orange and purple. The mother prepared a simple meal for her children, using the fire she had learned to control carefully. The rancher watched from the porch, his eyes scanning the horizon. He felt a deep sense of responsibility for the family, a protective instinct that overrode fear or hesitation. He had faced danger before in his past life, but this was different. These were innocent lives, dependent on his decisions and actions. Night fell, and the desert became cooler. The stars appeared in the sky, twinkling like tiny beacons of hope. The rancher lit a lantern on the porch, casting a warm glow over the yard. He could see the mother and her children inside the barn, safe for the moment, but still vulnerable. He felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders, but he did not shrink from it. He would protect them, no matter the cost. Suddenly, a noise reached his ears, a faint rustling, almost imperceptible, over the night wind. He stiffened, moving silently toward the barn. His instincts were sharp, honed from years of experience. He could not afford to ignore even the smallest sound. The mother noticed his movement and whispered to the children to stay still. She trusted him completely, though she did not know the full extent of his knowledge or skills. He crouched near the barn door, listening carefully, and then peered into the darkness. A small figure moved among the shadows, cautious and deliberate. The rancher recognized it as one of the men from earlier, returning to check the property. He did not panic. Instead, he acted quickly and quietly. He moved to a position where he could be seen clearly, signaling to the man that he was aware of his presence. "You should leave," he called, his voice calm but firm. "This is private property. You are not welcome here." The man hesitated, uncertain. The rancher took a step forward, showing confidence and authority. The intruder finally nodded, muttering something under his breath before retreating into the darkness. The rancher watched until the figure disappeared completely, ensuring the family remained safe. Inside the barn, the mother let out a quiet sigh of relief. She held her children close, feeling gratitude and admiration for the man who had protected them so courageously. She did not know the details of his past, but she understood his character through his actions. He was a man of courage, of integrity, and of quiet strength. The rancher returned to the porch, his eyes scanning the horizon one last time for any signs of trouble. He knew that challenges were not over, that the desert held many dangers, and that the family's safety was never guaranteed. Yet he also knew that he had acted wisely and decisively. He had protected them today, and that mattered. As the night deepened, the desert settled into a calm silence. The family slept peacefully, their trust in the rancher growing with every passing moment. The mother watched over them, feeling a mix of relief and hope. She knew that tomorrow would bring new challenges, but for now they were safe. And so, under the vast, star-filled sky, the rancher and the family he had taken in endured the night together. The desert was harsh and unpredictable, but in this small corner of the world, courage, strategy, and compassion had created a fragile haven. It was a reminder that even in the face of danger, acts of bravery and kindness could prevail, if only for a little while. The next morning, the desert air was cool and crisp, a welcome change from the heat of the previous days. The sky was pale blue, and the sun began to rise slowly, painting the landscape with soft gold. The rancher stepped outside, his boots crunching over the dry dirt. His eyes scanned the horizon as always, alert and careful. The night had been quiet, but he knew that calm could never last long in these lands. Danger often came suddenly, and he had learned to prepare for it. Inside the barn, the Apache mother stirred quietly, careful not to wake her children. They had slept peacefully, which was a small miracle in the harsh desert. She brushed the hair from their faces and adjusted the blankets around them. Despite her exhaustion, she could not rest fully. She had a plan in her mind, a way to move her family to a place where they could finally be safe. The rancher emerged from the porch carrying a small bundle of supplies he had prepared for them. He had packed dried meat, bread, water, and a few extra blankets. He placed them on the ground near the barn and motioned for the mother to come outside. "I have made some preparations," he said quietly. "If you are ready, I can help you leave this place. There is a safe path, I know, away from soldiers and towns that might question you. It will not be easy, but it is possible." The mother looked at him, her eyes wide with gratitude and a hint of fear. "Are you sure it is safe?" she asked softly. "I do not want to put my children in danger." The rancher nodded. "It is the best option we have. I will guide you, and we will move quietly. The desert can be harsh, but I know the land. I will do everything I can to keep you safe." The mother took a deep breath and nodded. "Then we will go," she said firmly. She gathered her children and secured their few belongings. The older child held the small bundle tightly, while the younger one clung to her mother's skirt. Despite their fear, the children trusted the rancher as their mother did, and that trust gave them courage. Before leaving, the rancher checked the barn and yard one last time. He wanted to ensure that nothing was left behind that could betray their presence. He also wanted to make sure the family understood the path ahead. The route would be long and difficult, with few water sources and little shade. It required patience, careful observation, and steady movement, but he knew they could make it if they followed his guidance. They began their journey just after sunrise. The desert stretched endlessly before them, a mixture of rocky ridges, dry washes, and sparse vegetation. The rancher led the way, moving quietly and deliberately. The mother followed closely, keeping her children near. Every step was measured, every movement cautious. They could not afford to draw attention. As they traveled, the rancher shared small pieces of advice. "If you see dust in the distance, stop and watch," he said. "Do not make noise, and do not move until it passes." The desert can hide many dangers, but it also protects those who pay attention. The mother nodded, absorbing every word. She had learned to read danger quickly in her life, but the rancher's knowledge of the land and its patterns was extraordinary. She realized that without his guidance, their chances of reaching safety would be much lower. The children walked quietly, their small feet making soft impressions in the sand. The older child occasionally glanced at the rancher, asking questions in a whisper about the land, the animals, or the path ahead. The rancher answered patiently, understanding that curiosity and learning were part of surviving in a harsh environment. By midday, the sun had risen high, turning the desert into a shimmering, almost blinding landscape. The rancher led them to a small shaded area beneath a few sparse trees. They rested, drank water, and ate small portions of the food he had brought. The mother tended to the children, brushing dust from their hair and checking their clothing. She felt a deep gratitude for the rancher's guidance and courage. Without him, she knew they would have been lost. As they continued their journey, the desert seemed to shift around them. Rocks gave way to sandy washes, and the wind carried faint sounds in the distance. The rancher paused several times to observe the terrain, making adjustments to their path to avoid potential danger. He remained vigilant, aware that even the slightest mistake could expose them. Hours passed, and the family moved steadily, relying on the rancher's knowledge. The mother noticed that despite the physical strain and the heat, her children remained calm. The presence of the rancher, a strong and steady figure, gave them reassurance. She realized that trust was as important as caution, and in this moment she trusted him completely. As evening approached, the sky turned shades of pink and orange. They reached a small, hidden valley protected by rocky outcrops and shaded by sparse trees. It was a place the rancher knew well, a safe haven where soldiers and settlers rarely traveled. He helped the family settle, showing them where to rest, where to find water, and how to create a small fire safely. The mother knelt beside her children, helping them drink water and rest. She looked at the rancher with deep gratitude.
"Thank you," she said softly. "I do not know how we could have made it without you."
You have saved us.
The rancher nodded, though he did not speak much. His actions had been enough. Words were unnecessary. He had guided them safely across dangerous land, protected them from harm, and ensured they reached a place where they could finally rest. Night fell, and the valley became quiet and calm. The mother and her children slept under the stars, feeling a sense of safety for the first time in many days. The rancher remained nearby, keeping watch, alert to any movement or sound that might signal danger. He felt a quiet satisfaction knowing that his efforts had made a real difference in their lives. Over the next few days, the family settled into the hidden valley. They found small streams of water, edible plants, and safe spots to rest. The mother taught her children to move quietly and to respect the land. She continued to marvel at the rancher's knowledge, his careful planning, and his unwavering courage. She realized that he had acted selflessly, risking his own safety to protect them. The rancher visited them each day, bringing small supplies and checking on their well-being. He taught the mother how to recognize signs of approaching danger and how to use the land to their advantage. He showed her how to create simple signals and safe hiding spots, ensuring that they could protect themselves even if he could not be present. As days passed, the bond between the rancher and the family grew stronger. There was no need for elaborate words or gestures. Trust and mutual respect had formed a connection deeper than explanation. The mother began to see him not just as a protector, but as a person of courage and integrity, someone who had chosen to act with kindness despite the risks. One evening, as the sun set behind the rocky outcrops, the mother spoke to the rancher.
"We will need to move again soon," she said softly, "but we will always remember what you have done for us."
"You have given us more than safety. You have given us hope." The rancher nodded, feeling a quiet warmth in his chest. He had acted not for reward or recognition, but because it was the right thing to do. He had faced his own fears and past regrets, and in helping this family, he had found a sense of purpose he had not felt in years. The mother smiled, watching her children play quietly nearby.
"We will find a permanent place," she continued, "a place where we can live without fear."
"And when we do, we will carry the memory of your courage with us." The rancher remained silent, knowing that words could not capture the weight of their shared experience. Actions had spoken more clearly than any sentence could. He had protected them, guided them, and ensured they reached safety. That was enough. Over the following weeks, the family grew stronger and more confident. They learned to navigate the desert, to find food and water, and to live quietly in a harsh land. The rancher continued to visit, offering guidance and support, but also allowing them space to grow independent. His quiet presence reminded them that even in a world full of danger, kindness, and courage could prevail. Finally, the day came when the mother felt confident that her family could move on safely. They packed their few belongings and prepared to leave the hidden valley. The rancher accompanied them part way, ensuring that the path ahead was clear. He watched as they moved steadily, the children walking beside their mother, their small faces bright with hope and determination. Before they parted, the mother turned to the rancher.
"We will never forget you," she said softly. "You saved our lives and showed us that even in the hardest times, there is goodness in the world." The rancher nodded, his eyes reflecting both pride and quiet emotion.
"Take care of each other," he said. "Be careful and trust your instincts. You are stronger than you know." The family continued on their journey, disappearing into the desert with the confidence that safety and a future awaited them. The rancher watched until they were out of sight, feeling a sense of fulfillment and quiet peace. He had faced danger, acted with courage, and made a difference. That was enough for him. As the sun set over the desert, painting the sky with shades of orange and red, the rancher returned to his property. He walked among his fences and cattle, reflecting on the events of the past days. He had helped a family in desperate need, guided them through danger, and given them a chance at a new life. In doing so, he had faced his own fears, reconciled with his past, and discovered the quiet power of courage and compassion. And so, under the vast, star-filled sky of the Arizona desert, life returned to its quiet rhythm. The rancher continued his work, the land stretching endlessly around him. Yet in the memory of the family he had helped, there was a lasting mark, a reminder that even in the harshest lands, acts of kindness and bravery could change lives forever.